Since 1959, the entire country of Israel has stood in silence for 2 minutes each April to remember and commemorate those who lost their lives during the Holocaust. This day in Hebrew is known as Yom HaShoah. Today we mark the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in April and May of 1943. The Jewish community in the Warsaw Ghetto led an armed revolt after rumors that the Germans would deport the remaining ghetto inhabitants to the Treblinka killing center. As German and police units entered the ghetto, members of the Jewish Fighting Organization and other Jewish groups attacked German tanks. It took German forces nearly a month before they were able to completely pacify the ghetto and deport virtually all of the remaining inhabitants. This horrific moment in history is deeply personal to me because my grandfather, Robert Osman, was brought to this country by his parents in 1908. The remaining family remained in Warsaw, Germany. And I remember seeing for the first time a copy of my family tree on both my grandmother and my grandfather's side. My grandmother's family also came to this country around 1910 to escape the horrible pogroms that were terrorizing Jewish communities across Eastern Europe. And what's striking about the family tree is that my grandmother's family is here, my grandfather's family is on a different tree, and there were dozens of other cousins, sisters, uncles, and aunts. Our family tree continues to myself and to my daughter. All of those other family trees that weren't my grandfather's family, my grandmother's family, they all ended right at the end of 1930. And I can only imagine that my grandfather's family, who was in Warsaw, probably perished in the Warsaw Ghetto. All of those legacies, all of those potential heirs, all of those memories of what those families went through were all erased by the Germans. Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Remembrance Day, reminds the world to never forget, but we are forgetting. And worse, we're right now witnessing a concerted effort to erase history. Let me tell you why this resolution is so important at this moment. The Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, or the Claims Conference, just released findings of a comprehensive survey of Americans. The survey shows a remarkable lack of understanding of the Holocaust, especially with our millennial population and those younger. The Claims Conference said that, quote, there are critical gaps both in awareness of basic facts as well as detailed knowledge of the Holocaust. This is an American society, and they stress the importance of stepping up our efforts to educate our population and our students in schools. Just under a third, 31% of those Americans surveyed do not believe that 6 million Jews perished during the Holocaust. They believe instead that the death toll is somewhere under 2 million or lower. This was true for 41% of millennials. Almost half of Americans could not name a single concentration camp. Almost half. Two-thirds, 66% of millennials were unable to explain or recognize what Auschwitz was. This is a word that's become synonymous with genocide, and yet they didn't know what it meant. 11% of Americans said that it's acceptable to hold neo-Nazi views. As we all know, last year, our own president refused to condemn a neo-Nazi march that led to death in this country, and even said that some of the participants were good people. What's worse is the number of prominent American politicians and thought leaders who refused to stand up and publicly condemn the president's statement. At the same time as Americans are forgetting about the Holocaust, a February report from the Southern Poverty Law Center showed that the number of hate groups in the United States has increased by 20% in the past 3 years. The number of neo-Nazi groups has increased from 99 in 2016 to 121 in 2017. Members, many of those groups are headquartered right here in California. We even see the ugly face of anti-Semitism shown publicly on our college campuses in California. Now, many Americans think that Hitler rose to power through force, that it was an overthrow, some kind of military coup in Germany, but it wasn't. And that's very important to remember. Hitler came to power through a democratic election in a country that was one of the most educated and at the time socially progressive nations on earth. He didn't come to power on a platform of mass murder. No, he very insidiously began to erode the civil liberties in Germany, to turn the population against one another by marginalizing minority populations, to allow those rights to be eroded over time. It was his populist views and that strategy of marginalizing citizens and turning citizens against one another and against their neighbors that led to the Holocaust. Colleagues, we must stand against these kinds of tactics when we see them in our midst. When we have a current federal government that holds on to power and tries to gain power by marginalizing members of our own society because of their religion, seeks to deny basic human rights based on people's gender, their sexual orientation, their race, their religion, to deport our residents in the dead of night, to separate families from their children. We must stand out against that. Currently in Poland, a law was passed just recently that made it a criminal offense to imply that the Polish government or even Polish citizens were in any way complicit in the Holocaust. Thankfully, the strong survivors in Poland have said that they will not be silenced, they will not be afraid to speak the truth. And we have to stand in solidarity with them and stand up against that kind of erasure of history. I want to first of all acknowledge the survivors in our midst today, to thank them for standing strong, for being here to bear witness to that history. We must all pledge to stand strong against hatred, intolerance, and anti-Semitism, and the erasure of history.
At the desk of Assemblymember Friedman is Herbert Mires, a survivor. Escaping the U.S. on Kristallnacht, Herbert Mires enlisted in the U.S. Army where he translated military documents, including military orders signed by Adolf Hitler.